After years, again new nasty attacks, lies and slander from one's own family.
Excerpt from the 529th official contact conversation on 3rd November 2011.
On Saturday, the 1st of October, you explained to me the unpleasant thing that was going to happen regarding another evil attack being launched against me from my own family, which actually happened on the 13th of October. On your advice, however, I did nothing about it, but I want to ask a policeman friend of mine what he thinks about it in the next few days. Maybe he knows something that the two of us didn't know and hadn't considered.
Keeping quiet about it was my recommendation, but also take advice from your friend. Perhaps, as I advised you, you should search out all the statements from the contact conversations that deal with the attacks against you from your own family, because Asket already drew your attention to this in the 1950s, and we also spoke to you several times about these unpleasantnesses. The fact that in the end you did not allow yourself to be tempted over time by the lies and slander that were publicly brought against you to also take a public stand on the matter was only to your advantage, which is why I think that in this case too it will certainly be good if you do not speak out publicly on the matter. What I can imagine is that the policeman who is your friend will advise you in such a way that you will take action in the police and in court for the sake of justice. But you should think about that well before you act on it, because taking action against your own family member will certainly not be easy for you.
I have searched out the corresponding passages in the contact reports and also copied them as you see here. Asket's statement of 7th February 1953, Volume 1, page 325, sentence 45.
In your own family, hatred and disrespect will rise up against you, making you know the last secrets of human beings and their psyche, when one of your own will betray you. A contact report, 11th December 1979, Volume 3, page 408, sentences 169,171.
Gilgamsha will meet with a very serious car accident around the time she comes of age in the early 90s and will become severely disabled. She will no longer be accessible to her mission and everything, nor will Methuselah, who will be completely alienated from the mission. This will also be the case with Atlantis at first, but he will find his way back to the mission and the group community at a later time. Age Contact Report of 16th June 1987, Volume 5, page 362, sentence 85.
Besides, as I have already said, they are trying to destroy the teaching of the Spirit and your mission, also by inciting unstable Earth humans to kill you or to make you impossible through lies, deceit, and slander, and to portray you as a liar, a swindler, a forger, and a cheat, which unfortunately you will even experience in your own family, as I have seen through a vision of the future. Each contact report of 26th October 1994, Volume 7, page 292, sentences 11-13.
Nevertheless, you will still have to bear many hard and painful blows, both from within your own family, which will rain down on you and hurt you, as has already been foretold to you by Asket, and also from outside. Attacks will continue to take place on you and harm you. 1995 is the turning point, but you must not hope that all evils will visibly disappear. Especially from within your own family, many thorns will still be hurting you, tearing inflaming wounds and causing you distress. Each Contact Report, 28th November 1995, Volume 7, page 407, sentences 1922. The truly honest will continue to stand by you and recognize the truth as such as you bring and explain it to them. You have nothing to hide, for you have not been guilty of any lie, nor any fraud or deceit, nor any charlatanism. Therefore, do not let yourself be worked over or undermined by those who are evil and malicious, who will never give up finding things to defame you, for these human beings are sick with hatred, envy and jealousy, which is why they believe they can find something in everything and everyone that you could have used fraudulently to falsify photographic evidence, and so on. They are so sick in their thinking and acting and in their feelings that they torture and destroy themselves and block their evolution. This is unfortunately the case in your own family.
Two core group members have also referred to these statements. While all members find the whole of the lies, slander and hate speech incredibly primitive, as do outsiders who have been harassed with an open letter to feed you. And it is precisely as a result of the incredible primitiveness of the 12 internet-page letter that I do not want to add it to the conversation here. If you want a copy of it, I would be happy to make one.
That is not necessary because I have already read the whole thing. That this vile tirade, dripping with lies, slander and hate-mongering, has been irresponsibly published is testimony to the utterly reprehensible mindset of children the writer and those who assist him are. This also makes public and spreads the same despicable attitude of the person who made it possible for the letter to be published on the internet, thus causing damage to himself, as is the case with the person who wrote the abusive letter. A decent, correct and righteous human being would never commit such a baseness and would also never offer his hand to it. If you call the letter merely primitive, you do not express it strongly enough, for it corresponds to a vicious and monstrous reprehensibility by which the writer publicly pillories himself and reveals what a vile disposition he is. And I can say and judge this very well, because I know the reality and have perceived it all the last 4 decades or so, and consequently know very well that all the accusations listed in this letter correspond to nothing more and nothing less than malicious lies and slander. And if you do not want to keep quiet about the matter, then I think it would also be very appropriate and correct if you were to publish what we have just been talking about in a bulletin. But you have to make your own decision about that.
I will think about that.
Excerpt from the 530th official contact conversation on 19 November 2011.
May I first confront you with the vexed matter concerning the letter from, because I have taken up some points here and clarified them somewhat. I suppose it is likely that the whole thing will be helpful if I file a charge of defamation according to what the policeman friend explained to me.
So you do want to take that step? You are not spared anything with regard to the fact that lying and slanderous attacks are also being made against you from your own family, as Asket first explained to you on the 7th of February 1953, but as Quetzal, my daughter, Simiase and I have also predicted to you on various occasions.
I really want to take this step now because I have been thinking about it for more than a month now and have therefore also slept very badly all the time because the matter has been constantly running through my thoughts and feelings. My really decent letter of the 10th of October, which you can read here as a copy, has not borne any fruit because it was apparently simply ignored and not answered. Here you go.
Reads your letter is really decent and correct in its entire contents. Nothing can be found fault with it.
It is not convenient for me to write nasty letters. It is also very difficult for me to take official action against one of my own family members, but I think that this is the only way I can regain my composure and put everything right. The lying, slanderous and hateful attacks against my person this time are just far too blatant, defamatory and insulting, and so correspondingly defamatory, reputational and destructive to be left unanswered.
It must be very difficult indeed for you to take action against a family member over this, but it is reasonable to understand that you are now really compelled to take steps against the obscenities and lying, defamatory and reprehensible accusations. For my part, I have observed everything that has happened for the last 40 years or so, and that it is therefore not surprising what is happening now with the lies and slander and hatred against you. The whole thing repeats itself in relation to what was already shamefully done to you in the same sense, but only the lies and slander this time are much worse. And according to all that I know from my 40 years of observation, I can't say that the whole of the lies and slander against your personality and against the group members has no truth whatsoever. That is why I have also once again thought thoroughly about all the tremendously reprehensible and lying as well as slanderous accusations, and now find that you must not remain silent this time. However, it is most unfortunate that you have to take such serious steps in an official manner against a family member.
You can say that again, dear friend. Everything is really not easy for me and I have to know on it, but this time I really have no choice but to do something about it.
Excerpt from the 531st official contact conversation on 5th December 2011.
Good, thank you. Since I am again having to deal with habitual, that is to say notorious, lies, slander and hate speech, I would like to know what the actual state of affairs is with this in all things all around, so also where the origin of such behavior lies and what further effects are connected with it.
Habitual lying and slandering have their origin in a compulsive situation that has been inherent in human beings since childhood, which is also called notorious or pathological, that is to say pathological lying as well as pseudologia fantastica, depending on the case. This is usually accompanied by antisocial behavior as early as childhood and adolescence due to a personality disorder, whereby social norms and rules are disregarded and often very blatantly violated. In a certain way, there is an inability to integrate and fit into a righteous life in the human community, whereby the antisocial personality disorder behavior of habitual liars usually continues throughout life and has a damaging effect on the community. Persons addicted to notorious, that is to say pathological habitual lying, perfectly deceive their family members as well as psychological professionals, judges, authorities, superiors, so-called friends and fellow human beings in general, whereby the pretense of illnesses and allegedly suffered violence and so on are common procedures. As a rule, habitual lying is also associated with a psychological disorder, which originates in childhood, but can also manifest itself through illness or accident, as well as through bullying. In addition to habitual lying, coupled with antisocial personality disorder, this also includes thievery, running away from parental care and the parental home, as well as vandalism, begging for any kind of material value and getting into debt in various forms. Neglecting learning of any kind with regard to a valuable way of life and so on is also connected with this, as is not following and not conforming to the norms and rules of righteousness. The whole thing expands more and more, up to workshiness and lawbreaking, and that into adulthood, where everything is then carried on. The form of habitual lying cannot be controlled by those who are afflicted by it, so they take the lies they tell and the slander they produce as fact and truth, because their brains cannot distinguish between real memories and imaginary memories. Consequently, habitual liars also readily accept false memories when they are told or even suggested to them as lies or false memories and so on by third persons. In the same way, in the case of false psychological therapies and so on, false memories are forcibly evoked in the persons addicted to habitual lying. If a false psychological treatment is aimed at finding harmful experiences and events and so on in the past of the person being treated and making them rememberable, which are to be remedied, that is to say regulated. Such a psychological procedure is not only extremely questionable and raw and testifies to the incompetence of the psychologically trained person, but it is also fundamentally dangerous for the habitual liars, because false memories are built up in them to a great extent, which are then taken as fact and truth by those treated in this false psychological way and are accordingly wrongly evaluated. And this happens because memories of events and experiences of other persons are taken by the habitual liars as facts and events experienced by themselves, namely because the brain of the pathological liar is not able to distinguish between what is experienced by himself and what is experienced by other persons. In many cases, habitual liars with an antisocial personality develop through the mother's wrong or lack of righteous care, or through her completely wrong treatment and upbringing, with abuse, lies and slander, although the same can be the case on the father's side. Genetic factors or broken family relationships can also play a very important role, as well as alcohol, drug and medication abuse or violence on the part of one parent or, under certain circumstances, both parents. To elaborate on the habitual liars, they usually have an antisocial personality disorder that prevents them from empathizing with the thoughts and feelings of others. This disorder also does not allow them to fit into the social norms of society, so they often blatantly violate them, whereby criminal acts are not uncommon because, as a result of the lack of a sense of justice, no clear distinction can be made between my and your, and everything is only evaluated for one's own advantage. Human beings afflicted with such a personality disorder are, on the one hand, genetically afflicted by a parent who suffers from the same evil, and, on the other hand, these are hardly capable, only with extreme difficulty, or not at all capable of a change for the better. Human beings of this kind are usually very quick to become physically and in speech very aggressive and full of irritability, whereby the inhibition threshold for this is extremely low and consequently everything can also be accompanied by violence. And once again, it is important to point out that, because in this respect there are no limits, the non-payment of debts as well as criminal acts and deeds usually always appear, but no remorse is shown for this. Tolerance is also very low in terms of frustration, as is blaming other persons for things that are based on false memories or on one's own actions and deeds, which are then blamed on others. Thus, actions, words or speeches of other human beings are also very quickly and prejudicially condemned in an extremely negative way as a threat and provocation, which is consequently also reacted to aggressively by word or deed. The resulting actions, deeds, backtalk, insults and accusations arise spontaneously, thoughtlessly and completely unplanned, as do false superficial explanations for one's own faulty behavior in every conceivable relationship. So others are always to blame for conflicts that habitual liars cannot cope with, so they always blame other people. The conscience of habitual liars is dulled and not capable of remorse or repentance, so they also cannot rationalize their social and human behavior consciously and for the better. Their world of thoughts and feelings is extremely limited with regard to righteousness, respect and honesty, and so on, which leads them to simply imitate the behavior and gestures, and so on of their fellow human beings in order to appear equal to others, whereby they can then be very charming, but take advantage of and manipulate others, and this because they can't perceive their thought-feeling impulses very well and use them for their own advantages and purposes. They therefore lack empathy as well as thoughts and feelings of guilt, as well as not infrequently valuable feelings regarding fellow human beings, because the thought-feeling relationships are so minimal that they cannot put themselves in the thoughts and feelings of other human beings. This also says that they lack compassion for themselves as well as for fellow human beings. All this also indicates a very low level of control with regard to valuable character actions. The strong impulsiveness plays a decisive role, which, however, wants to be covered up as much as possible, whereas, on the contrary, anger and rage and so on reveal everything. This is also accompanied by underdevelopment and a lack of a sense of responsibility, which is why it is almost impossible for them to show consideration for the thoughts and feelings as well as the rights and wishes of other human beings. They very seldom cultivate relationships in a socially acceptable way, but rather those that are not worthy of being called valuable and which have very changing, superficial and unstable forms, whereby, however, as a rule, a calculating usefulness is in the foreground, which, however, can be covered up in such a way with the remarkable acting art peculiar to pathological liars in every respect. Consequently, and as a result of the false charm of habitual liars and their lies, relationships not infrequently develop in which those who trust them are exploited. The fact that for such relationships the liars choose especially unstable, psychologically damaged, naive or somehow consciousness, mind and reason damage human beings is a fact that is founded in the fact that the pathological liars have a kind of fine sense for recognizing such human beings and making them dependent to the point of bondage.
Such a thing is actually unfortunate because, as is clear from your whole explanation, the human beings who are sick are the notorious liars. And is there really nothing that can be done to free them from this? It would be desirable that such human beings could be helped.
As far as the whole thing is concerned, I already explained that it is a pathological matter and therefore a pathological manifestation. However, this is so deeply anchored in the consciousness that there is hardly any possibility of ever completely remedying it. Small successes may be possible, but the rule proves that a comprehensive resolution of the condition and thus real help is hardly possible. Since 1975, when we came into contact with this phenomenon in certain Earth humans, we have studied it in detail. We have collected a great deal of material for this purpose, which has since been processed and evaluated by our renowned scientists, to which I also belong. In doing so, we have also accessed psychological teaching material from earthly teaching institutes and psychologists, but this has not exactly brought us much in the way of insights. The result obtained so far therefore corresponds to what our own research, clarifications and findings and what I have explained to you.
Regrettable, but I think that human beings who are harmed by notorious liars and slanders should be able to defend themselves in one case or another, shouldn't they? And what about slandering actually? Is that always accompanied by notorious lying?
The whole thing is indeed very regrettable, but a great deal of damage and inconvenience arises from it, against which sometimes there is nothing to do but to consider and carry out a defense against it. And as for slandering, it is to be said in this connection that as a rule, slander always arises from certain malicious or morbid lies, and not only caused by habitual liars.
That should actually be enough. Thank you very much for your explanations. It is all very unfortunate indeed, and frankly, I am falling from all clouds, for I did not know all that was behind the notorious lying. Unfortunately, I have never fathomed it.
Earth is an island on reason and madness in dealing with population growth.
A sensible and expedient regulation of population numbers is a responsible task, because it determines the will and woe, that is to say the survival or demise of a tribe, a people and ultimately of an entire humanity. Whether a group of human beings within their limited living space is intelligent and foresighted enough to maintain the balance between natural death rates and births, or whether they neglect their self-responsibility in this regard for a variety of reasons and remain inactive, determines whether they can lead a healthy life or abandon themselves to extinction. This applies in the small as well as in the large, because the causal law of cause and effect applies to everything and everyone, in the microcosm and in the macrocosm, to a family as well as to a tribe and to humanity as a whole. Presumably it is easier for the inhabitants of a small island than for other human beings to become aware of the limitations of their living space and its resources because, standing on the ground of their small world, they can directly experience for themselves, with a turn on their own axis, the limits of their island world that enclose them. Nature itself reminds them every day that they must live in harmony with it, appreciate it, care for it and protect it, because they are dependent on it and cannot survive without it. The ostrich method practiced by the majority of Earth humans out of sight, out of mind, and the repressive attitude what must not be, cannot be towards the population catastrophe, are almost impossible on a small island. If a group of human beings or a tribe of people can develop uninfluenced by external interference, free of religious obsessions and in harmony with creation and nature around them, there is obviously a natural need to keep the population at a healthy level. As soon as the sensitive balance between human beings and nature is disturbed and becomes unbalanced by unnatural compulsions such as cult religions, rationality, greed, materialism, and so on, there is a danger of unrestrained overpopulation, which heralds the self-destruction of culture. The following life stories of two islands hold the possibilities before our eyes as a negative and positive scenario.
Example: Easter Island self-destruction through overpopulation.
Easter Island is not only interesting from an ufological point of view, see Figu contact reports. In his article Die Osterencel Source des Greifach, Deklet Kot, 1987, ISBN 3242310743 or the Cousteau Almanacs, the World Famous. Marine explorer Jacques Yves Cousteau, born on the 11th of June 1910 in Saint-Ander, France, writes the island of Easter. June 1910 in Saint-Ander de Quebec near Bordeaux, died on the 25th of June 1997 in Paris, writes that the island must once have been a paradise, so lush and so promising that the natives called it the Petit navel of the world. It was the birthplace of a flourishing advanced civilization. There is no sign of this today, as the population has exploded over the years. Experts estimate that 20,000 human beings lived on this small island at the same time. So they used up their rare sources of life, cut down more and more trees, and used every square kilometer of soil for cultivation to feed the ever-growing population. When their religious zeal grew to the point of devouring everything, they cleared the entire island as if they had lost their senses. They needed wood for carts, for the huge statues, and for their inscription tablets on which they carved hieroglyphics. By the 17th century, there were no trees left on Easter Island. Eventually, overpopulation had robbed Easter Island of almost all its food supply. The few remaining cultivated areas and fishing grounds were fiercely guarded by feuding families. Intruders were killed and eaten.
A microcosm of our planet.
Cousteau goes on to write that the human bones on Easter Island reminded him that the Earth was a living body, an interconnected system of precisely coordinated, constantly changing forces like the sea and the coast, the trees and the desert. On Easter Island, as elsewhere, human beings had apparently entered into a natural process and discovered too late that the damage they had caused to nature could no longer be compensated or healed. The consequences of ignorance were just as fatal as the consequences of irresponsible behavior. In Cousteau's opinion, we should all learn from the sad parable of Easter Island. We should look at our Earth as an island and understand that its resources are just as limited as Easter Island. He warned that if our nuclear power plants melt down, our toxic wastes pollute the waters, and the vast quantities of missiles and bombs hoarded by humanity are fired, the same thing could happen to Earth Island as to Easter Island. He went on to express his hope that we would prefer to pass on the wealth of human ingenuity, experience and wisdom to living successors. Finally, he proved the islanders right, who are said to have said about themselves, "We are not the victims of an evil god, but the victims of all the evils we ourselves have created."
Example of Tekopia in balance with life through birth control. Source excerpts from //d. Wikipedia.org/wiki/Tekopia.
Tekopia is part of the Santa Cruz Islands and politically belongs to the Temote province of the Solomon Islands. The island is the remnant of an extinct volcano. Its highest point, Mount Rione, reaches a height of 380 meters above sea level. The land area is about 5 km. In the center of the island, an old volcanic crater contains a large lake, Lake Tiroto, which is about 80 meters deep. A drought in 1952 and 1953 caused 17 deaths on the island of Tikopia. Tikopia is inhabited by about 1,200 human beings living in over 25 villages, mostly along the coast. Previously, the population was consistently around 1,000, as the small island with traditional Polynesian economies could not support a larger number of human beings. In order not to exceed this population size, strict birth control was practiced. Only the eldest son of each family was allowed to father children. If, however, an unwanted child was born, it was inevitably doomed to die. The limited resources of the island were developed and used by means of tried and tested Polynesian agricultural methods. These were based on population density. The Polynesians knew from centuries of experience how to manage the limited resources of small islands. For example, once around 1600, when the number of pigs raised became too large, the islanders decided to slaughter the animals and turn back to fishing for animal protein, as the pigs were consuming too much agricultural produce and thus preventing a balanced diet for the human being. The culture of the Tikopians was highly developed and had a complex social structure, as is found in many Polynesian societies. Religious concepts and taboos were consistently followed. Due to the framework conditions they set care of resources, birth control, the population was able to successfully manage their small island and create what early visitors described as a little paradise.
Achim Wolf, Germany.